So 25 years ago today, two games came out in Japan. That's Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green, and the rest is history. And we look back on it now, Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise to ever exist. It's over $90 billion. And if you look back on how it affected Nintendo's own system lineup, the Game Boy had a massive turnaround when Pokemon did release, and it turned into this phenomenon here in the US when it released in '98. And I want to talk a little bit about that here today. Some of the sales numbers for the Game Boy around the time of Pokemon to show how important it was at the time and still is to Nintendo, and some of my own memories for an anniversary that's made me feel older. More so older than any of the other anniversaries that we've gone through. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So, as I said, it released in 1996 in Japan in February, but it didn't immediately, as I think a lot of people believe it was, it didn't immediately take off and become this massive thing. It actually took a couple of months for that to really happen, but we can see it in the sales charts actually. Take a look at this real quick. These would be the Game Boy sales in Japan, and they go by fiscal year, so it'd be April to the following March, and you can see the Game Boy was often running like pretty quickly, but it started to drop down. It actually started to trend completely downwards, and it looked like the generation was going to be coming to a close right around here in like 94 to 95, but then in 96, as I said, February, we had Red and Green release, and then we can see the following fiscal year, which started April 1996, so about a month after Red and Green released in Japan, a massive jump in sales. It went from 1 million units, which, if we look at that now for what the Switch does, not great. I mean, back then, this is gaming in its infancy in the early to mid 90s when everything was really starting to get back to normal for gaming in the US, and it was still rolling along fine in Japan. But around this time, you can see it jump up to almost 3 million, and then 4.22, 4.7, gold and silver released around this time, and it just continued to push. And remember, this is a Game Boy that released in, 1988? So it is an older system that continued on and had a massive second wind once Pokemon hit. And actually, if we look at the US charts, it's even funnier. So this is the chart here that tracks Nintendo's fiscal years in the US and Canada, the Americas pretty much. And we can see here, it started off all right. I mean, it took off pretty well here in the early 90s, but it did also start to drop down where it went down to like 1.5 billion, 1.39, but then something happened. Pokemon came out, and we can see it start to really move and jump here with 3 million as like the hype started to build, because we were aware here in the US that Pokemon was going to be showing up. There was advertising starting to pop up, and it was starting to make a lot of noise online. So if you were online in the mid to later 90s, you may remember a lot of talk on different message boards about Pokemon. Like, it was still something we were trying to figure out and wrap our heads around with this because it wasn't translated to English or anything, and we didn't really have access to emulators like we do now, where we could, if the game leaked online necessarily, we could try out like Red or Green. Later on, we were able to with Gold and Silver because Gold leaked online, but something like this we were starting to hear about, and there was a lot of hype being built by Nintendo. And then when it did release, and it came out right when like the Game Boy Color was coming out, if I remember, it all stacked on top of each other, and you can see, I mean, that following fiscal year, April 1998 to March 1999, a massive jump. In fact, that's the best-selling year for the Game Boy, and that's like 10 years later. The Game Boy line, technically at that time, was a 10-year-old system. Now, they'd have the Game Boy Color, which obviously helped boost things, but still, the Pokemon game still worked on your original brick Game Boy. That's how I played it. I played it on the original brick Game Boy for, I want to say, a year and a half before I got a Game Boy Color, but 4.48, and then the hype levels around Gold and Silver. If you thought the hype levels around Blue and Red when they released here in the US were massive, the hype levels around Gold and Silver were off the charts. It was crazy back then because we got blitzed with the Pokemon games, the anime, the merchandise, the cards, all of this building up to these big time sequels that were coming out. And everything just exploded after that. 8.7 million Game Boy systems sold, and then it followed up with another year of 7.7. All of this leading directly into the Game Boy Advance that immediately took over because it was fully backwards compatible. 7.57, 7.8, 9.4. Pokemon showed up at the perfect time for Nintendo to continue really just pushing their handheld line that started to kind of stagnate there for a little while. Now, I remember when it first came out, Red and Blue, the mall was absolutely crushed around its release, and the games were impossible to find. I asked for Pokemon Blue for that holiday, and I did end up getting it, and somehow my parents found it because it was very difficult to get that. It was very difficult to get the cards. If you think people going out now and buying up all of those Happy Meals to get those Pokemon cards and like the McDonald's just out of them, if you think that's weird, we had these gold cards, these medallion things that came out for the first movie, and they were impossible to find. I remember when Gold and Silver were coming out in the US, we had like this year period where it had already released in Japan, and we're basically just kind of hanging out waiting for it to come out here in the US, and a ROM of the game found its way online, and it was all in Japanese. However, some people decided to try to translate some of it, and there was this terrible version of the game that was going around, and it was 20% translated, and it wasn't like the first 20%, it was like bits and pieces of the game that were just 20% of the game in general was translated. So like some of the names were done, but they were all wrong. And occasionally you'd come across a word in like the text bubble that was correct, but it was all gibberish. However, a lot of people still attempted to play through it on these terrible like Pentium 2 machines that were certainly not prepared to emulate any of this stuff. So it was like 5 frames per second. I remember checking it out. I had no idea what was going on at the time, but everyone was trying to figure out why there was a red Gyarados in the game. And there was a lot of talk, a lot of theorizing around it. But it was just a really funny time online back in the day on like the AOL message boards. We had like game winners, and yeah, even game facts. That's been around for a while. Those were just the good days, right? Where you would come home from school or you're on winter break if you just got the game and you're sitting down on the couch playing your Game Boy, and then you're watching like Toonami or Dragon Ball or something on TV. It was those are the good days. But let me know what you guys think about the Pokemon 25th anniversary. This certainly makes me feel older than other anniversaries, and that might actually be a good thing because that probably means that I have so many memories that I'm thinking back to that were kind of triggered by this anniversary, but they're all really good memories. The old days of playing Pokemon and hanging out with friends and trying to find that one person with a link cable so I could finally get my Alakazam. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.